On blood for Bio 163. This will be for the second exam module, and we will cover everything about blood pertaining to what we have learned in the modules over this unit. So first we will talk about our goals for this portion of the video. I will hope that by the end I have fully explained things enough that we can understand the functions of blood, know and recognize the functions of the components of blood, and understand the form components of blood and blood composition. Now for the functions of blood. There are three main functions of blood that we are required to understand, and these are transportation, defense, and homeostasis. Now, these three functions are vital to the human existence. For transportation, in particular, we have transportation of nutrients. When we think of our digestive system, what we eat is absorbed into our bloodstream, and that nutrients that we get from food is transported via blood circulation. There's also transportation of oxygen. So that oxygenated blood from the lungs is brought to organs and tissues of the body to help with cellular processes. And then carbon dioxide is also removed from cells via blood circulation. In terms of hormones, there is also the endocrine glands where that transport to target tissues. And waste and byproducts are carried to kidneys and liver via the blood circulation system. For defense, white blood cells are a big component of this. White blood cells handle bacteria and any sort of foreign material that they can defend the body against. And defense can also be considered platelets. Platelets are the coagulation units that help when we get a cut or any sort of injury that helps stop bleeding in that area to seal from any further blood loss. These are extremely important. Low counts of platelets can be indications of serious underlying health conditions. So overall, the importance of the defense function of blood cannot be understated. For the function of homeostasis, this is the regulation of body. Blood helps with temperature regulation. Depending on what the weather is outside, blood is directed towards the skin, especially on warm days to release heat from within the body to help cool us down. And on colder days, blood is directed inward to kind of conserve the heat that our body has. From a chemical standpoint, blood helps maintain the pH of our body. It acts as a buffer to keep around 7.4 pH. And for water balance as well, plasma regulates water distribution within the body. So that is very vital as well. Now, moving on to the many characteristics of blood. Blood is one of the many connective tissues within our body, but this is one of those that we talk in depth about. For color of blood, when we see blood, we can think of it in two different ways. It can be bright red when it is oxygenated, or when it's deoxygenated, it is sort of that darker red color that we often see with cuts and those sorts of things. Now, what's interesting about the blood is its temperature runs a little bit warmer than our actual body temperature, because our body is around that 98.6 degree mark, where our blood is around 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, about 38 degrees Celsius. Again, as previously stated, characteristics of blood, the pH of blood is around 7.4 for the pH in that chemical balance. It can range though from about like 7.35 all the way up to 7.45 within that range. But it's important, especially in terms of with autoimmune disorders like diabetes, the acidity of blood can be something that has to be heavily monitored. So this is a very important characteristic of blood. As for blood volume is about 8% of our body weight, and how much blood we have differs from males to females. Males have about 5 to 6 liters on average. Excuse me. And females have about 4 to 5 liters on average. Now on to the composition of blood. For the formed elements that blood makes, there are 3 that I would like to note. The first being red blood cells, which are also called erythrocytes. Erythrocytes, or red blood cells, are what transport oxygen and carry it to the cells and tissues of the body. And they also then help in removing the carbon dioxide from cells through respiration. Aiding in that waste removal process. White blood cells are also called leukocytes, and they're the body's immune defense in terms of like allergy reactions and any sort of foreign disease, illness, bacteria. That will be the leukocytes' jobs. And then, as touched on before, we have the platelets, which are the thrombocytes, which aid in blood clotting and or coagulation of the blood. Now on to blood plasma. In simple terms, this would be the liquid portion of the blood. It's about 92% water and 7% of it is protein. And that little bit of extra leftover percentage to make 100 is solutes within the plasma. But for our major proteins, we have albumin. This is the one we see the most of. It helps maintain osmotic pressure within the body, which is supporting like the overall blood volume that facilitates that blood pressure within our body. Then we have globulins, my bad. And these globulins transport proteins and antibodies in that immune defense process that we talked about with white blood cells. Third, we have fibrinogen. This is the one that we see the least of. It's produced by the liver, and it helps with blood clotting. It's very much needed. Blood clotting would very much struggle without this major vital protein. Now, the solutes that we talked about that are sort of in that blood plasma, this liquidy portion, are like electrolytes. We think of our salts, sodium, potassium, calcium as well. And then we have our gases, carbon dioxide, oxygen. We have our nutrients, which we get from food. So that would be like our glucose or amino acids. And then we have like our metabolic waste, whatever is needed to be removed from the body at that time. One thing that is important to mention is the hematocrit test. Now, this is vital in kind of testing the amount of red blood cells within the body as a percentage of the total blood in the body, how much of it is contains red blood cells. Now, these normal values for males are 42 to 52%, and females being 37 to 47%. These values differing and males being greater makes sense because the male body contains more blood on average than the female body in terms of liters. And over to the right, you can see the process by which the hematocrit test is performed, it is through this centrifugation process, which spins and separates the blood based on mass and density. So it'll separate it into the plasma. On top, it is the least dense. And then that middle white portion that you'll see there would be the white blood cells and the platelets. And then that last bottom portion, the most dense, is the red blood cells. And through this process, we can calculate and observe the amount of red blood cells or the percentage of red blood cells in the blood. Now, these red blood cells that we keep talking about and all the blood cells, how are they formed? They're formed through hematopoiesis. This is the formation of new blood cells. It is constantly going on within the body. We are constantly creating more blood, and it's going on at all times. This occurs within the red bone marrow of spongy bones. Over here, you can see my little depiction to kind of in the middle of a long bone. So, for example, like the femur, the humerus, any of those classic bones you think of, fibula, tibia, they have in the head of the bone, they have this kind of spongy part, or it's also called trabecular bone. And this contains the red bone marrow where this hematopoiesis occurs. These stem cells within the red bone marrow are what create the formed elements of platelets, red blood cells, and white blood cells. We have two kinds of stem cells. Lymphoid stem cells create our lymphocytes, so our immune and allergy response blood cells. And then we have the myeloid stem cells, which create our red blood cells, our platelets, and anything else you can think of. And this small depiction over to the right, you can see how they kind of differentiate. It has sort of a feedback loop, so a stem cell might just stay basic stem cell and repeat the process and continue to divide, or it will differentiate and specialize into a myeloid stem cell, a lymphoid stem cell, and from there on further specialize and differentiate into megachoranoblasts to form platelets, proerythroblasts to make erythrocytes, or red blood cells, myoblasts to create basophil, neutrophils, or eosinophils. These are our granulocytes. Or to make monoblasts, which are our macrophages, which have that characteristic engulfing function. For the lymphoid stem cells, we have our natural killer cells, and then we make the small lymphocytes, and we have T cells, B cells, and then our plasma cells. Now I would like to touch on hemoglobin. Hemoglobin, excuse my pronunciation. Hemoglobin is what carries and transports oxygen and carbon dioxide to the muscles, tissues, and organs of our body. It is a complex protein molecule, which consists of alpha and beta kind of formations that come together to create this complex quaternary structure protein molecule. It has a unique shape that I tried to depict here, where it concaves in the middle and kind of bulges on the side. So on the left, we have sort of a transverse look at it, and then from the right side, we have sort of like a top looking down kind of view. And this look is what is typically pictured when we think of red blood cells. It kind of looks like a little piece of dough with a thumbprint in the middle of it. It's this biconcave disc shape, and it increases surface area to the volume ratio, which is more surface area per square inch is super efficient for whatever sort of exchange has to happen on the surfaces, especially with gas exchange of hemoglobin with the oxygen and CO2. And it also increases the ability of hemoglobin to fit through small spaces within the body. Regulation of red blood cell production. This is regulated by something called erythropoietin, or EPO for short. It is secreted by the kidneys, and it is a response to low blood oxygen. This is called hypoxia. And this hypoxia, sensed by the EPO, stimulates the red bone marrow, and therefore to bring more oxygen to the blood. Over here, you can see the complex protein that I was referring to. You have the 2 alpha and 2 beta sections of the protein, and each has what we call a heme group, which is just an iron molecule, an Fe+2, which is signified by the navy blue kind of dots or circles within this complex quaternary structure of the complex protein. Common disorders related to red blood cells, hemoglobin, is anemia. Anemia is common within the endurance sport community, just because of the demand that we put on our red blood cells and in that training process. So this is signifies too few red blood cells or an abnormal hemoglobin count. And this can be really detrimental to the body. It can be an iron deficiency, a bone marrow failure, but it causes great fatigue, weakness. Oftentimes people look for easy bruising and pale skin as well as signifiers that something may be going on in regards to red blood cell count and hemoglobin. And like I said before, this hypoxia that is sensed by the body, then EPO is secreted to stimulate more red blood cell production. Now, lastly, I would like to address blood types. These are determined by antigens that live on the surface of the red blood cell membranes. Over on the left, you can see a little depiction of a little red blood cell. And then these green things sticking off of it are very poor illustrations, but illustrations nonetheless of what those surface antigens would look like. Later in the module, it said later we will look more into these antigens on the surface of red blood cells during like the immune system unit. But understanding that the antigens that are present on a person's red blood cells are crucial to blood transfusion safety. If you've ever been familiar with blood typing in terms of like O negative, O positive, B negative, B positive, AB, those are all created by and determined by the antigens on the surface of red blood cells, which is why O negative is the universal donor. However, anyone else with any other blood type would not be able to accept any blood that wasn't O negative or their own. That is the end of my review of blood for this unit.